into episode 31 of Preps to Pros with the Oyster Boys. I'm Cooper Petagna alongside Andrew Ivins, and it is week 10 of college football. And we got a loaded slate for you today. We're going to talk a little bit about the juice, what's happening on the recruiting trail, maybe some teams we're not so familiar with and what's going on with them. Andrew Ivins will break that down, and then we'll talk about a huge recruiting weekend in the SEC. Georgia hosting the number one ranked Tennessee Volunteers. LSU also hosting Alabama for a top 10 matchup. And then Miami, Florida State, a lot of implications there on the recruiting trail. And then we'll break down the Ohio State Buckeyes, the team of the week, also undefeated, coming in at number 2 in the college football playoffs initial rankings, number 4 in the 24/7 composite team rankings. Then we'll get into our 2-minute portal madness is coming. Andrew Ivins will hit on that, and Jimbo may be in trouble down in College Station. I'll hit on that as we wrap up the show. But Drew, happy Halloween, man. A couple days late, but I hope you're doing well.
I'm doing good. Hey, I'm ready for this upcoming weekend. I think a few days ago, someone said that week 10 wasn't going to be it in college football, but I looked at that schedule and I think there's some must-watch TV from like noon on. So I'm fired up for this weekend. Obviously, Georgia, Tennessee is the big headliner, but I think there's some other games, and I know we're going to get into a bunch of them. So, Coop, I hope you're ready for this show because I like what we got on the schedule.
Week 10 is him, as the kids call it nowadays, from what I understand. But Drew, let's get into the juice right away, and we're going to start with Notre Dame and the Fighting Irish, the number 3 ranked recruiting class. Marcus Freeman still looking for a quarterback, and a new name emerges from the West Coast footprint out of the state of Arizona. And Drew, a UCLA baseball commit, looking at our guy over here, Rock Cholowski. I got to get the pronunciation right. We had a couple of people in the comments making sure that we're up to speed there. But Drew, Notre Dame still sniffing around, trying to find their signal caller in the class of 2023. It looks like they might have somebody circled here.
Yeah, Rock, this is a guy, Tom Loy, who covers Notre Dame for the network. He brought him up to me really a week ago, and then you fast forward a little bit. Rock's going to visit this weekend. He's also got a baseball scholarship offer from Notre Dame, which just made the College World Series last year. So Notre Dame trying to get a guy who maybe a stopgap in between what they've got in 24 with C.J. Carr. They're still trying to find an arm. And Rock, to me, is an intriguing guy. He's only started 5 games there in Arizona at the high school level. Last year, he was the backup quarterback. But he's a really talented baseball prospect. I think a good chance he actually probably gets drafted early on in the MLB draft, but you never know right now with the current name, image, likeness landscape. You can get some deals in place. Maybe you don't need to go play Major League Baseball. So interested to see where Tommy Reese and these guys go. To me, Cooper, I don't know about you. I mean, I see it with Rock. I don't know if he's a guy where I would rely on him potentially starting a game one day for the Irish, but we do know that they have C.J. Carr coming at some point down the line. So interesting visitor, and there's actually some more multi-sport visitors that are going to be on campus this weekend for Notre Dame as well.
Yeah, you almost are still putting the pieces together when it comes down to this and Notre Dame and their quarterback situation, what they're trying to do there. And obviously who we talked about here, Rock Cholowski. I got to go back to the pronunciation there, but certainly a guy that is projected day one first round draft pick in the MLB draft, committed to UCLA for baseball. Notre Dame, a team that just made an appearance in the college baseball World Series, beating Tennessee, the number 1 team in all the land. So if you keep up with college baseball, there you have a little bit of a reference point. So it's going to be interesting. Notre Dame took Stephen Jelly in last year's cycle as well. So C.J. Carr on the horizon in 2024. We'll keep an eye on how this plays out. But, Drew, you mentioned another multi-sport athlete going to make his way to campus for the Irish. That is Jordan Faison from the state of Florida, and a guy that's starting to pick up a lot of interest on the recruiting trail, just coming off an official visit to Iowa. The Hawkeyes see him on the offensive side of the football as a receiver. Drew, I think me and you both see him as a potential defensive back at the next level. But after watching the tape today, Drew, you said it, the tape pops, and I really like this kid a lot. A 3-phase player, very versatile, heady guy. You can kind of see why the Irish have interest in Faison.
Yeah, and Faison is committed to play Notre Dame or to to play lacrosse at Notre Dame. He's a really talented lacrosse player, and he starts at quarterback for Pinecrest High School, which is a small private school in Metro Fort Lauderdale. I don't think they've had a football kid in a few years, but Liddell Betts, the running backs coach at Iowa, he used to coach at Pinecrest. He has ties to the area, so that's how they found out about Jordan. Got him up last weekend for an official visit. Sounds like things went well. But again, he likes lacrosse. Notre Dame's obviously a very good lacrosse program. So it'll be interesting to see which direction this recruitment goes. I know a few schools just trading some messages with a group of 5 staffers, Power 5 staffers. A lot of kids want to go and a lot of schools want to size up Jordan because he's rushed for over 1,400 yards in 9 games as a senior, playing primarily an option quarterback. He's got 25 tackles on defense, a few interceptions. I think me and you both said safety. So an interesting prospect. I think he could play at Notre Dame. I mean, there are worse guys you could put in your 85. So, we said it with Rock. We'll see what happens with Jordan. I mean, just some interesting multi-sport athletes, interesting things happening this weekend in South Bend. And those guys are going to see a great game with Clemson coming to town.
Marcus Freeman in the Irish trying to put the finishing touches on the number 3 ranked recruiting class in the country. The Irish currently have 16 top 247 commits. That leads the country, tied with Georgia. So Marcus Freeman definitely making some leeway in his first year in South Bend on the recruiting trail. Drew, let's go to the Big Ten now and go to our good friend Brett Bielema in Illinois. Pass rusher down in Florida, a guy that they're working on. You brought this guy up. The Illini trying to flip a Kent State commit right now, and that is Maverick Garasio. 17 sacks, 9 games. This is certainly a guy with an up arrow that you like.
Yeah, and Maverick, when we did, each of us did the audits of our region, this is a kid I came across, and I kept scratching my head. How is he committed to Kent State? Because I think when you put on the tape, you see someone that can get off the quarterback from the edge. He's listed at 6'3", 225 pounds. I think he's all of that. I'm actually going to be at his game on Thursday. They have one final game before the playoffs start down here. Like we said, committed to Kent State, but I think Illinois is in the driver's seat here. Brett Bielema and his staff, they do an excellent job of mining the Sunshine State and finding some hidden gems. Look at what they did last cycle with Gabe Yakus, the defensive lineman, edge rusher, who has turned into one of college football's top true freshmen. He's a kid that they found on Florida's Space Coast. Not a lot of people are in on him. Look at what he's doing now. I think Florida's big 3 all wish they had Gabe in their defensive 2 deep. So Maverick, a kid not many are talking about right now, but I wouldn't be surprised if he goes up to Champaign this weekend, flips his commitment, and then 2-3 years from now, he's making an impact in the Big Ten. So certainly a name to know. And hat tip to Illinois, man. Right now, they have the number 1 defense in all of college football. I think they're first in scoring, first in total defense. I mean, Brett Bielema, these are the type of guys you take and build out that roster. So interesting to see what happens with Maverick over the weekend.
Defensive coordinator Ryan Walters, certainly a hot name in the coaching circles. But Drew, we're going to stick in the Big Ten, and Michigan State in need of a running back. We saw Kedrick Criscano, a top 247 running back, recently decommit from the Spartans. It looks like they're going to head to the state of Florida to try to find their next guy.
Yeah, and Mel Tucker and his staff have put out a few different scholarship offers, but the one that kind of piques my interest is to Javen Simpkins, a kid at Miami Norland High School. I say it all the time. Hey, this is a kid that cuts his teeth at Traz Powell down in Miami-Dade County. I mean, you get these running backs from the 305. They know contact. They know how to spin out of different things like you're seeing here on the screen and find green grass. And Simpkins is a kid that's going to play in the Under Armour All-America game, currently committed to Georgia Tech. We know Georgia Tech, they're looking for a new head coach. I think there's a chance he could end up sticking in Atlanta, but also the possibility of playing in the Big Ten for a program that just turned out a star running back in Kenneth Walker, who's having success with the Seattle Seahawks. Simpkins told me yesterday in a message he's planning to get up to East Lansing for an unofficial visit, could also get up there for an official visit. I think he'd be an excellent take for Mel Tucker and the Spartans, who are having some difficulties here in 2022 on the field. But Simpkins, one of my favorite, kid that missed all of his junior season after a nasty car accident. He's lucky to be alive. And this year he's averaging over 7 yards a carry down in Miami-Dade County. So nice offer for Michigan State. I've been wondering when the big dogs would come calling for Mr. Simpkins.
There you have it, the juice from Andrew Ivins, as we like to start our show. And remember, if you want to tune in for everything, all things recruiting, you can find that at the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe, leave a like, also leave a comment as well. Busy month and a half coming up for us, Drew, here at 24/7 Sports as signing day approaches on December 21st. But first, we still got some college football games that need to be played, and the College Football Playoff Committee started last night with their initial rankings, and guess who was on the top? That was Rocky Top. Number one, Josh Heupel, the number one team in the country, is Hendon Hooker, one of the Heisman hopefuls in front runners. They got a big one this weekend as they travel to undefeated in the defending national champions, the Georgia Bulldogs, in Athens. And Drew, this is a big game as proved by Georgia's recruiting list that they have in attendance. Drew, I think as long as I've been doing this, whether that's been on the team side of things or in the media side, this is one of the most impressive recruiting visitors lists that I have ever seen stacked from 2023 to 2024 to 2025. A big-time opportunity for Kirby Smart and the Bulldogs that currently sit at number 2 in the 24/7 Sports composite team rankings. And if there's one thing we've learned about Georgia, Drew, the more that time goes on, they just get stronger and stronger. A lot of top names left on the board: Samuel Mpimba, David Hobbs, just to name a few, David Sanders in the class of 2025, and Drew, KJ Bolden in their own backyard. This is a dynamic list. Drew, I guess some of your takeaways on some of these names and what kind of hangs in the balance of Georgia and Tennessee this weekend.
Well, I mean, look, Georgia games have been loaded with elite recruits for the past 2 years. Ever since they made that magical run last season, Kirby Smart and his department of recruiting staffers have done an excellent job of identifying top talent, getting them to Athens and putting them in the stands. The thing is, though, there really hasn't been a marquee game, a game that everyone had to see. And we're seeing it this weekend with number one ranked Tennessee coming to town. I think Rusty Manziel for Dogs 247 thinks that this is going to be the biggest visitors list ever since he covered the program. You know, I sent a few texts to some people I know in Athens. They brought up that Notre Dame game back in 2019. That's when they had Darnell Washington there, a bunch of other different guys. But this visitors list is elite. What stands out to me is that guy right there, Justice Haynes, the running back, Georgia legacy, who's committed to Alabama. Kirby Smart on UGA's bye week. He was at Buford, Mill Creek. He went to see Justice Haynes play. That's a guy that they would love to flip. And then I think the two defensive linemen at the top, Davian Hobbs, Samuel Mpemba, those are Georgia-Tennessee battles. And Cooper, we always talk about it. I mean, this game right now is won in the trenches. You have to have a good quarterback, and then you want guys that can get after the quarterback. And Davian Hobbs, he's one of the best. He's a freak, a guy that should have been on my freaks list. And then Samuel Mpemba, he looks like he made him in create-a-player mode. I mean, he's got the chiseled body, and he too can get after the quarterback. So I think in these type of recruitments, the winner on the field actually could have an impact on which direction these things go with momentum. Now, what I want to ask you, Cooper, is you've been a part of these big recruiting weekends in the past. How do you prioritize with over 150 names there? Who do you show attention to? Who gets in the locker room? How does that all play out? Take us inside that.
Well, that's when the recruiting budget and the resources of a program like Georgia come into play. And there's a lot of stories about recruitments that have been mishandled at the past. And you could go back to Georgia, whether that's Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields, people that I've worked with that have been part of that program at UGA. These are really big opportunities for programs like the University of Georgia to make a very good impression, whether they're trying to close in the process in the cycle of 2023 or whether they're making an initial impression in 2024 or 2025, some of the top players on campus. But this is when it comes into play. Your director of on-campus recruiting and the recruiting staff, everybody is going to have a hand in this weekend. It really doesn't matter what your role is, what your title is. Everybody has a part to play in whether or not your program is going to have success. So you have to be able to take advantage of that. And you'll see a lot of things happening behind the scenes this weekend, position meetings that happen before or after the game. A lot of the coaches and the coaching staff, their families meeting with prospects and their families as well. You would not not believe the amount of production that happens in terms of recruiting on a game day. And believe it or not, it's actually a very good day to get a lot of things done. So Georgia certainly going to have their hands full, but this is a great problem to have. And there's so much implications on this game in terms of today in the college football playoffs in pursuit of a national championship. But for the next 3 to 4 years, I mean, you look at some of these names, if Georgia is able to get some of these guys in the boat, they are a well-oiled machine right now, and it certainly seems like they are creating some distance between themselves and everybody else. So a big operation. We'll see that this weekend in Athens, and depending on the result, I think it's going to be an awesome atmosphere this weekend. That place is going to be bumping. So Georgia, Tennessee, certainly the game of the weekend, but another game in the SEC, Drew, with a lot of big recruiting implications as always, but a top 10 matchup. And I don't think people expected this in the beginning of the year, but number 6, Alabama, the highest ranked 1-loss team in the country, going to play the highest ranked 2-loss team in the country, and Brian Kelly in LSU in Baton Rouge. That's going to be at 6 p.m. Central Time, and that's going to be a raucous environment in Death Valley at Tiger Stadium. But Drew, this is a big weekend for LSU at home, and a lot of implications for Alabama as well as we look to the future. So I'm going to let you hit on that, but LSU, a couple guys coming to campus. Desmond Ricks, the number 3 cornerback in the class of 2023, a former 5-star reclassified to the class of 2023 from 2024. Javian Toviano will also be on campus in Baton Rouge. Isaac Smith, Drew, safety out of Mississippi, a guy that you like a lot, and DJ Chester, who's going to make his decision tomorrow, top 247 offensive lineman. So a lot riding in the SEC this weekend. But Drew, when you look at LSU, Alabama, and we kind of talked about it, the implications for Georgia this weekend, if LSU finds a way to win this game, which I think is pretty plausible at home, what are your thoughts about Alabama, where they stand from 35,000 feet, and how this might impact them on the recruiting trail?
Well, I'll be clear up front. I'm not doubting Nick Saban, right? But I think a loss to LSU essentially would take the Crimson Tide out of the college football playoff picture. And, what happens from here? We haven't seen Alabama really make that huge, shocking flip yet in the 2023 cycle. Now, they've won some key recruiting battles like they always have. But, if Saban were to fall to LSU, right? It reminds me back in 2019 when Alabama missed out on a New Year's Six game. What did they end up doing? Well, they ended up signing the highest ranked recruiting class ever at the time in the class of 2021 that included 7 different 5-stars. So I'm just interested to see what happens and how does this Saban react to all this stuff? What do they do on the recruiting trail? I think not a lot of people are talking about in this current NIL era. I wouldn't be surprised if Nick Saban has this thing figured out and he waits until the 11th hour to make some of his moves in some of these more high-profile battle recruitment. So that's what I'm keeping my eye on. Shifting it back over to LSU, Cooper, you talked about it in our pre-production meetings. The visitors list is loaded with guys in the secondary. And right now, LSU's pass defense, I think it's sitting in the middle of the SEC. If they're able to slay the dragon that is Nick Saban, I think that helps them big time with Desmond Ricks. You mentioned Isaac Smith. I said it on our rankings call a few hours ago. I've always loved that kid, and I've wondered why more schools haven't been in on him, and it seems like LSU has finally moved him up the board. So I think that's what's at stake there. We said it last week after Desmond Ricks reclassified. LSU's a team to watch, and Florida, they just fell to. Georgia, they're going through some things as well. So Desmond Ricks is the headliner of the weekend and the one everyone needs to know about.
Well, Desmond Ricks, and why that's important. Desmond Ricks, 2 of his top schools, LSU and Alabama, so he's going to get an up close and personal look this weekend in Baton Rouge. But LSU doesn't have that guy in the secondary right now. Credit to Brian Kelly and his staff with the job that they've done in short order to make LSU's secondary respectable. But in terms of LSU being known as DBU, there's not that day one Sunday player that we've seen and gotten really acclimated to in years past at LSU. I think Desmond Ricks would give him a guy like that. I think Javian Toviano would certainly be close behind as well. So LSU looking to close on the recruiting trail. And Drew, I'll say this, but Bryce Young is one of the most talented quarterbacks we have seen in quite some time. Heisman Trophy winner coming back for his junior season. He is gone after this season, more than likely to go play in the NFL. And then after that, we've gotten to see a little bit what Jalen Milroe can do at the helm of Alabama's offense. You also have Ty Simpson waiting in the wings, another guy that was highly touted last year out of the state of Tennessee. But those guys aren't Bryce Young. So if you look at this this weekend and Alabama comes on the wrong side of this, you wonder, it's just kind of a head scratcher that Alabama, with the best quarterback that they've had in quite some time, and that's even with Mac Jones and Tua Tagovailoa, would fail to reach a college football playoff national title. Would be something to look back and say, yeah, that's a big missed opportunity for the Crimson Tide. But Drew, I'm with you. They have some meat left on the bone. A lot of these names that I brought up with the University of Georgia, Damon Wilson being one of them, Desmond Ricks we mentioned, Keon Keeley as well. So Alabama can get hot in a hurry. James Smith, Quay Russaw, a couple guys still hanging around that Alabama's in a good spot for. So I don't think anybody's hitting the panic button yet, but just something to keep an eye on. But Drew, now it is time to get to our team of the week, and that is the Ohio State Buckeyes, number 2 on the field in the CFP, number 4 in the 24/7 Sports Composite Team rankings. They are the team of the week, and I think we can just really thank our guy, JT Tuimoloau. What a performance. We highlighted that on Monday. If you haven't seen that, that is on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. But Drew, the Buckeyes right now, they just kind of do what they do year in and year out. They find themselves within the top 5, one of the better, if not one of the best recruiting programs in the country. When you take a look at this top 5 class that Ryan Day, Mark Pantoni have assembled, what are some of the things that stick out to you immediately?
I mean, it's going to sound obvious, and if you follow college football, this isn't going to be surprising, but I think Ohio State's just doing an excellent job of loading up with elite pass catchers. I go back to that OT7, 7-on-7 event back during the summer months there out in Las Vegas, and really the standout wide receivers were all guys headed to Ohio State. Noah Rogers, Carnell Tate, Brandon Ennis, Jelani Thurman. I mean, Zone 6 isn't going anywhere. I think with the group of pass catchers and skill players that Ohio State has assembled, this is a group where they're going to get off the bus and they're going to be able to score 40 points regardless of who's playing quarterback. And then you take into account that they got Dylan Raiola committed in the 2024 cycle. I like Brock Glenn, the arm they have committed in 2023. I just think the arrow continues to point up for Ohio State on offense. They're not going to miss a beat with this group of pass catchers. And again, that's not surprising with Brian Hartline there. And kids, even in this current landscape, they still take notice of what schools do in the NFL draft. And right now, Ohio State is churning out wide receivers at an elite level.
I think Ryan Day and company know who they are and what they want to do on the recruiting trail more than anybody in the country, and that's saying a lot. I think they are a master at their craft when it comes to the identification and evaluation process and building relationships. And when they know they're out on a top target, they are quick to pivot. So I think they do a really good job. Like I mentioned, the early identification, finding those guys earlier in the process, making contact with them, getting them up to Columbus, whether they be in different parts of the country, whether that be the West Coast footprint, the Texas footprint, where they've had a lot of success, Florida, Georgia as well. They know who they are. They don't try to overextend themselves, and they're very convicted in their evaluations. Drew, you mentioned it earlier in the cycle. We talked about the lack of success that Ohio State had on a summer official visit, which was really an anomaly for that program. They did a really good job bouncing back on that. They brought some guys up, especially on the interior defensive line, a guy like John Walker, who eventually ended up committing to Central Florida. They did a really good job pivoting off of him, locking a guy down like Caden McDonald last night. So at times where you start to question it, I think they really know who they are. They've done a good job assembling this class top to bottom. And like you said, Drew, what Brian Hartline continues to do at the receiver position, I know we have just gotten numb to this, but it's nothing short of amazing of the first round talent that he continues to stockpile. So Ohio State continuing to get it done at the highest level. Certainly a couple big names that they're still after this cycle as well. But Drew, let's get into those pass catchers, as we're going to highlight three guys here as the headliners in this class. And I want to start with the guy that we talk a lot about on this show, but the guy that you love. You have been around him for a long time. I don't think there's a better person in this industry to maybe describe who this guy is as a football player, who he is as a competitor, but that is Brandon Ennis from American Heritage.
Yeah, and I think Brandon Ennis is a guy that's going to go in and he's going to play at Ohio State, and we're all going to see him catch passes. But I think it's what we don't see him do on the 14 Saturdays or whatever bowl game days a year that's going to elevate Ohio State. This is a guy who wants to win. He's going to challenge his teammates, and he's going to make everyone better around him. And how do I know this? Well, I've seen him do it for the past 4 years down here in South Florida. He's a kid that was at university school, then True Prep Academy. Now he's at American Heritage Plantation, where last season, due to injury, he had to play quarterback, and he responded well, rushing for over 500 yards. Well, now he's back on the outside. He's been excellent as a senior in 3 games against top 100 teams, according to Max Preps. He's got 13 catches for 215 yards and 3 TDs. I think this is a guy that has one of the highest ceilings out of anyone in the class of 2023. I think he's going to come in, and I think he's going to eat in that offense. And I think he's a perfect guy for Brian Hartline. I think he's one that we as evaluators have almost kind of look for reasons to pick him apart. Yeah, he's on a 4-4 guy, but he's a 4-5 guy to me. So I really like Brandon Ennis, and I feel convicted about where we have him ranked because he's the real deal.
I think he is one of the best football players in the entire cycle. You kind of slap that label on guys like Caleb Downs, Brandon Ennis. They just do so much. And when you look at him in his junior season, what he had to go through, this was a guy who had to play the quarterback position. They moved him all over the field. He still plays on the defensive side of the ball. He is an alpha, and the guy, Drew, that we have compared him to at the NFL level, and this has kind of been the one guy that we continue to go back to, but is Amon-Ra St. Brown, who played his ball at USC. Drafted in 2021, 4th-round draft pick of the Detroit Lions, and a guy that has certainly outperformed his grade projection. And when you think about Amon-Ra St. Brown and the type of player he was coming out of modern day in California, there was a lot of similarities to a guy like Brandon Ennis, a very competitive temperament, and a guy that could do a lot of different things on the football field. So as stacked as that room is that Brian Hartline has in Columbus, I think Brandon Ennis is a guy that will see the field very early at Ohio State. So Brandon Ennis, certainly a guy that we will have our eyes on in the future, and we're very excited to watch. But Drew, his running mate is another guy from the state of Florida, and a guy that, even though he's committed to Ohio State, that hasn't stopped teams like Tennessee from coming after him. But that is Carnell Tate. Big physical receiver, 6'2", hovering around at 180 pounds. And Drew, this guy just continues to get it done. Really like his physical makeup as well as what's between the ears. And Drew, this is a guy that you've kind of championed throughout the evaluation process.
Yeah, and it's funny because I was texting you. I mean, it's been super hard to find a player comparison for Carnell Tate. And what did you toss out? T. Higgins? I think I finally settled on Mike Williams, the former first-round pick out of Clemson, who is now with the LA Chargers. And why Mike Williams? Well, Mike Williams was an excellent body control, an excellent guy that could go up and get the football. And I think that's the two things that Carnell Tate does so well. We always talk about 40-yard dash times, and yeah, Carnell he's got a 4.7 or what is it, a 4.68 on record, but he's also returned kickoffs for touchdowns against elite high school competition there at IMG Academy. I think this guy is a smooth operator. I think he's someone that once he gets to Ohio State, his best football's still ahead of him. I think Brian Hartline can light a fire underneath him, teach him a few different things, and I think he's going to be able to be a go-to type of target for whoever's playing quarterback for the Buckeyes, whether that's Brock Glenn or Dylan Raiola. But I'm a big fan of Carnell Tate. You see him do some things, whether it's in the 7-on-7 setting or in a padded setting there at IMG Academy. You kind of walk away going, wow, all right, that's what makes him what he is. So, yeah, I'm a big fan. Coop, do you have a player comp? I know I just tossed out T. Higgins for you, but anyone that you can relate him to?
Yeah, I think when you toss out those names, people are going to say, well, those guys are 6'4" plus, big bodies in wide frames, and I think Carnell Tate, more from a play style than frame standpoint, probably compares to guys like that. And like you said, Drew, I mean, we had this guy, I think consecutive years at IMG's Pro Day is what they call it, but low 4.7s on the 40, but a guy that really knows and understands how to play the game, understands how to attack leverage, understands how to use his frame as a pass catcher, strong hands at the point of attack, and he is very elusive and dynamic in the open field. He plays bigger than his size at 6'2", so I think that's where some of the comparisons come from. The guy for me was Terrace Marshall out of LSU, who plays that way as well, second-round draft pick of the Carolina Panthers just a couple years ago. So I like Carnell Tate. I think he is a beautiful complement to a guy like Brandon Ennis. And Drew, we talked about it earlier in the process. You put him at Ohio State, you put him at Tennessee. That is a perfect fit for him. Obviously, the line of quarterbacks that they have in Columbus, he's going to have no issue getting touches in that offense. I think he'll develop beautifully at Ohio State. And this is going to be a guy a couple years from now is going to be either a day 1 or day 2 draft pick. I know me and you can't wait to see what happens with him. But the third guy, we're going to stick on offense here, and Drew, a big projection here, but a big guy that we like, and these are the guys that we like to take a chance on, but that is Jelani Thurman from the state of Georgia, and a guy that's got some genes. He is a freaky athlete and one of Andrew Ivins' freaks on Andrew's annual freak list, but a guy with a basketball background, Drew, that only continues to develop as a pass catcher, has to get better as an inline blocker, but I think it's what he brings to the table as a potential pass catcher down the line that has so many people excited about him.
You know, what's crazy is someone said to me, hey, I don't know how good he is at catching the football. And I had to do a double take because you put on the highlights, you put on the clips from what he did at the Under Armour Future 50 event. And I think he's one of the best pass catchers in the entire cycle. I mean, he's got that basketball background. He understands how to distribute his weight. He understands how to high point a ball. And, you put on the dunk highlights, you put on what he did at OT7. This guy's he's got a monster catch radius. Cooper, I tossed out the player comp, Mike Gesicki, to you when we were at Future 50, and I think you were kind of like rolling your eyes, but I think he's someone that you can flex out in the slot. He's, maybe he gets more wide receiver snaps than he does as a traditional tight end, but he checks off so many different boxes. He also plays a little defense, can get after the quarterback. You mentioned the athletic family there. Dad played in the NFL, mom played it in the WNBA, so I expect him to go to Ohio State and just to be flanked by all those wide receivers. He's going to be a walking mismatch for the Buckeyes, and I'm super excited about him. Your take on him, Coop?
Yeah, Gesicki was a comp. I think Jared Cook was the other guy that kind of stood out to me. You talk about this 6'6" plus frame, a guy that's got a lot of baby weight right now, that's going to play over 245 pounds. I think he's going into the perfect system for him. They're not going to ask him to do too much in line. I think his focus is going to be more as a pass-catching tight end. So you think about that, Drew, regardless of the quarterback, whether that's Kyle McCord, Devin Brown, Brock Glenn, Dylan Raiola. Think about the options that they're going to have on the perimeter and in line when you start thinking about guys like Brandon Ennis, Carnell Tate, Jelani Thurman, Bryson Rogers, who we're going to talk about here in a second. I mean, it is an absolute embarrassment of riches of what they have. And Drew, me and you talk about, the new NCAA football game coming back, and we've talked about Texas and the offensive firepower that they're going to have. I mean, Ohio State, you can't go wrong there. So when I pick up the controller the first time, it's probably going to be me and you on the headset, Texas, Ohio State first game there. But Drew, let's get to another part of this segment that we really like, but players that deserve more attention, whether that's nationally, whether they're not included into the top 247. And Ohio State is so deep in this class. They have 13 players in the top 247. That's one of the best in the country right there. But Drew, one of the guys that you think needs to get a little bit more attention in this recruiting process.
Kayan Lee, the cornerback out of the Atlanta area. He was a one-time Georgia commit. After Georgia went through some coaching changes, he opens things back up, ends up committed to the Buckeyes in the summer. To me, I think he is the top slot corner, really. If we're talking pure inside corners in the class of 2023, I think he's the best at that. And we're going to see him at the All-American Bowl in a few months as he wraps up his prep career. But if you read his scouting report, I call him a blue-collar corner. He's a guy that's not afraid to hit, patrol that alley. I think he can be a boundary guy. He's a ball hawk, 7 interceptions last season. A few of those takeaways came in the 3A state title game. I think he is perfect. In the Big Ten, you seem to always run into these, Purdue will have a receiver, Minnesota will have this speedy slot that kind of flies by these defenses. Well, to me, Kayin Lee's the guy. You stick right on him and you don't worry about it. So I think he's not being talked about enough. And I know he's in the top 247, but that was a big take for them. I would not be surprised if he's playing early on as a freshman. I think he has all conference ceiling. I would not be surprised if he merged that as well. So as a slot corner, Kayin Lee, I really like him. You need that these days. Everyone wants these big outside receivers, and they're trying to counter with these small, short guys that can run in space. So Kayin Lee's someone that you can put right there on the inside.
He's a dog. I love his mentality. I love his mentality to the football. He is very physical as a third-level defender. I think a guy that would maybe surprise some people, Drew, but just the way he plays the game, he's smart, he's tough, he's instinctive, he's versatile. You can move him all over the place. I think this is going to be a guy that plays sooner rather than later. And, Drew, I know you had another guy there that you wanted to give a shout-out, a big old physical running back from South Florida as well.
Yeah, we do. Mark Fletcher, Brandon Ennis' teammate there at American Heritage Plantation. We talk so much about the pass catchers on the front end of this, and we will. I know we're going to get to the early signing period, and on signing day, we're going to talk about that receivers class with Bryson Rogers being the 4th guy. But Mark Fletcher, to me, this is a perfect running back for the Big Ten. He's a big downhill runner. He's all of 6'1", 230 pounds. He's having an excellent senior season after dealing with some injuries as a junior, but he knows how to fall forward. So, it seems like every game or every season there's just this random Ohio State running back that maybe isn't the go-to guy that'll have a big night or a big afternoon. And I think Fletcher can be a change of pace. And if they need him to be a workhorse, he can be a workhorse as well. So excited about Mark Fletcher and his future there in Columbus.
Drew, I'm going to stick on the defensive side of the ball as well in terms of the guy that needs more love. That is Calvin Simpson-Hunt, the former Texas Tech commit to Joey McGuire. Ohio State flipped him earlier this year. I really love this guy. I love his patience at the line of scrimmage, a sub 5'11" corner. I think he can play either side. I also think he can slide inside and be a nickel. I think that's where his home is going to be at the next level. But a 10-6, 700 meter from Calvin Simpson-Hunt plays the game with a lot of patience. Like I said, what I mean by that, he's patient at the line of scrimmage, has really good eye discipline, and I love his versatility as well. So I wouldn't be surprised, another guy to go with Kayin Lee that could see the field a little bit sooner in his time in Columbus. I love what they're bringing to that defensive backfield. And the runner-up there, Drew, Bryson Rogers, you mentioned from the state of Florida, the 4th option. We didn't even mention Noah Rogers, who is a top 50 player out of the state of North Carolina. So that room's going to be loaded. I like what he brings to the table. He's a bigger guy that I think can play outside. You can move him inside as well. I think these guys with versatile skill sets, Brian Hartline, Ryan Day, have done a tremendous job finding guys that complement each other in the passing game. And I think we've seen the benefits of that in the past with guys like Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, and what we've seen this year as well. But, Drew, if there is one question mark that we have to nitpick in Ohio State's class, what is yours?
Can they hold on to some of these guys? And, it might sound silly at Ohio State in the college football playoff conversation. They don't lose many. And you're right, but they have lost Dejon Mustard-Johnson this cycle, Ty Lockwood, a tight end they lost to Alabama. And we talk about silly season. And, we were just on a call and discussing, hey, how much movement do we see? Right now, 88% of the top 247 is committed, but there's still going to be some movement. And I think there's really 3 recruitments to keep an eye on, and it's 3 guys we've talked about at length. Brandon Ennis with Miami, he says everything he needs to say about Ohio State. But let's not forget, there was a time when he was committed to Lincoln Riley in Oklahoma, right? And then he had to open things back up once Riley left for USC. He continues to say that Mario Cristobal texts him every morning. Guess who else Mario Cristobal texts every morning? That was Cormani McClain, and we all thought he was going to go to Florida. So I think, can Ohio State keep him committed? I'm going to say yes, probably, but you got to keep an eye on that. And I think the same thing with his teammate Fletcher down here in South Florida, kind of the buzz, that's the one to really keep an eye on it. And we know Miami wants to run the ball under Cristobal. And then the last one's Carnell Tate with Tennessee. You know, he's very close with Nico Iamaleava. He was in Knoxville a bunch of times, and there was rumors for that Alabama game he was actually going to show up in Knoxville for a visit, and he didn't at the last second. But he was tweeting about the Vols' performance. He knows what Jalen Hyatt can do. He knows what that offense is all about. So I think that's my big question. Hey, can they get these guys across the finish line? I would say yes. But you never know. Not in this collective era with the big boosters and what they're able to do. It's something you definitely got to keep an eye on.
Sneaky Miami. We saw with Cormani McClain. Keep an eye on Mario Cristobal. Still doing work. Brendan Ennis, Mark Fletcher, Drew. You've kind of dropped some breadcrumbs along the way about those guys. Miami's pursuit of those two guys. That is no doubt going to continue all the way until signing day. Drew, I think for me, second-level defenders, you saw Ohio State over the summer bring in guys like the likes of Caleb Downs, even though you really wouldn't call him a linebacker, a Swiss Army knife at the second level that you can move around. I think we saw guys like Troy Bowles, Tackett Curtis, Popo Aguirre, all on campus. And for Ohio State to come up over was a little bit of a question mark there. They do end up with a very good linebacker in Arvell Reese, a top 247 standout. But I think that was a position that they made a priority. So those second-level defenders, Drew, Keon Keeley still on the board, obviously more of an edge presence, Damon Wilson as well, Mateo Uaongalale. So some big cats still on the board for Ohio State, and that leads me to my next question for you. But if there is one prospect right now that they could finish with, and I think I just mentioned it, who would it be the icing on the cake for Ohio State in the 2023 cycle?
Well, I'm cheating right now because I can see your answers. I'm going to go with Damon Wilson, right? The kid out of Ennis. We've seen the crystal ball quickly shift over to him. You know, I think he's an elite edge rusher. Obviously, we have him ranked really high there at number 3. But to me, he's kind of what Ohio State's been missing. And we talked about JTT when we got this whole segment started and what he did. But, you know, Damon's a completely different prospect. He goes from speed to power to speed. He's got the ankle flexion. You know, he had a monster junior season in Florida's highest classification, 25 quarterback hurries, 15 sacks. Teams have been double teaming him here as a senior. He's also had to deal with that whole hurricane a few months ago, but this guy is the real deal. He was in the top 5 of the freaks list. He can jump and put his chin on the rim. I think if Ohio State gets him or the guy you're going to bring up here, I mean, these are potential first round picks, top 10 picks, guys that resemble the Bosa twins, guys that resemble Chase Young. So for me, it's Damon Wilson.
Yeah, he's a complete freak. The other guy that we're going to bring up here, the number 6 player in the country, the number 1 edge in the country, that is Keon Keeley, and a guy that shot up our boards almost a little less than a year ago, the former Notre Dame commit. And Drew, this seems to me now like an Ohio State-Alabama two-way battle here. In Ohio State, Larry Johnson, defensive line coach with the Buckeyes, has done a fantastic job. It seems like Ohio State is in the thick of it, but you talk about that next great pass rusher off the edge. I mean, whether that's Keon Keeley or Damon Wilson, both of those guys, and obviously we've already minted Keon Keeley as a 5-star, but Damon Wilson in that range as well. And don't be surprised if he ends up in the top 32 when it's all said and done. So no shortage of options there for Ohio State. And Drew, we didn't even mention Mateo Uaongalale as well. So 3 potential program-changing edge presence for Ohio State on the board as they try to work their way to the finish line and finish with one of the best prospects in the country. But Drew, that does it for Ohio State. Any final thoughts before we move on to the 2-minute?
I don't think a lot of people are talking about this with Keon Keeley. If I'm him, that traditional 4-3 front looks a lot more appealing to me than maybe a 3-4. So, we wondered when he would make an announcement. It sounded like it would come after he took that official visit to Alabama a few weeks ago. But I think the longer this thing stretches out, the better news or that increases Ohio State's chances of getting him. And I think that for him, a guy that has it all, finding the right scheme fit might be the biggest thing. So something to marinate on if you're an Ohio State fan.
Ohio State, number 8 in the country, the number 2 ranked Buckeyes. Their next 4 games, they go on the road at Northwestern. Then they have Indiana on the road at Maryland, and then they come back and they host Michigan. It's going to be a big game this year. Obviously, a lot on the line as both teams are in the top 5 for the college football playoff. But Drew, now it's time to go to the 2-minute drill. And it might be a little bit longer because your friend, myself over here, dropped the ball earlier in the show and left out a topic. So we're going to have to circle back on that one. But Drew, a lot of things happening, probably the most active NFL trade deadline that we have seen in quite some time. A lot of very good players in the league being moved around all over the place. And you kind of see this as the trickle effect maybe making its way to college football.
I just think it's the landscape right now with where we live. I mean, NFL trade deadline on Tuesday was the most active deadline in 30 years. And, you start reading about it. The NFL actually moved it back 2 weeks to encourage people to make trades. But I think we're living in this era now where if a guy doesn't want to be somewhere, you're going to ship him and send them somewhere else. I also think we're in this era now where if you're a player and you're not happy and you have the means of going out on social media, I mean, heck, you can essentially demand a trade. We saw Elijah Moore try to do that. I mean, this is a guy that was playing on a winning football team, but he wasn't seeing enough targets come his way. And, it just gets me thinking, how does this translate over to the college game? And I think with the current windows that the NCAA has put into place with the transfer portal, I think December is going to be wild. We're going to have that 45-day stretch. And if you're a guy at one of these big schools and, there's some recruits that are coming in getting NIL money and, hey, you're not happy, why would you not test the open market and see what else you can get out there? So I think we're not enough people are prepared for just how wild December is going to be because, most of these guys, they look up to the people in the NFL. People are moving at the NFL at an all-time high. And I think guys at the college ranks think they're going to be able to do the same. I mean, it used to be, hey, you don't want to recruit a kid out that's been to 4 different high schools, but in the NFL, apparently it's cool to move around all you want. So why can't you do the same thing when it comes to college? Team building is completely different now these days.
Oh, that's a really good point there. And that's the world that we live in, being able to get instant satisfaction. I think we'll see that at the college football level as well. Like you said, the next month and a half or so, going to be crazy in college football. Drew, mine's pretty simple. My 2-minute, a game that I was looking at as we're going through the slate this weekend, the one that I had circled was, here's this very sleepy 11 a.m. game that nobody's really talking about because you got 3-5 Texas A&M hosting 4-4 Florida. And you might be saying, okay, what are the implications here? Both of these teams, I guess, have underperformed. You could say that about Florida, or maybe they're right on track. But Drew, I mean, when you look at Jimbo Fisher and the Aggies, they need this one bad. And if there's one thing to take away from that loss to Ole Miss last week, it was the quarterback play was much improved under former 5-star Connor Wigman. So you're looking at Texas A&M and the future of this program. Like, they need this for momentum for the program. And I think if they can string out a couple of wins here as they close out the 2022 season, which has been a disappointment, it would at least give them something to build off of. But Drew, I mean, if Jimbo Fisher is staring down the barrel of 3-6 here with a loss to a Florida team, which is still trying to find their footing, I mean, how does that make you feel about the potential stability of Jimbo Fisher? And listen, we know that the administration has come out and given Jimbo Fisher their support and saying, listen, we're not going to make a change here. But you have to wonder, a loss like this, to me, when we've talked about what this kind of has reminded me of in years past, like last year, Dan Mullen, Florida, just got off the rails quickly. I wonder what a loss right now to Florida, a 4-4 team at home, would do to the psyche of the people in the high offices in College Station.
I think the noise only gets louder, and I said it. Great Week 10 slate. This is one that I got circled already. I'm fascinated to see what happens. Florida, they're going through some stuff as well. Brenton Cox dismissed from the team. He's no longer there. It makes it seem like Billy Napier, they just decided to make the decision to move on from an all SEC talent. So a game with, not a big one on the slate, but we're going to learn a lot about both those programs. And I've said it in the past. Seems like Texas A&M has turned into this villain. Everyone wants to see them kind of come crumbling down, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out for Jimbo.
Have slowly turned into the LA Lakers of college football. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. The Pels play the Lakers tonight. I'll be locked into that one. But Drew, let's take this home. I forgot to bring this up earlier in the show. What would a Oyster Boys Preps to Pros show be without talking a little bit of Florida State and Miami? So thank you to the Florida State and Miami fans who have held on this long to hear us talk about this game. But this is a big one as well. You might not think that looking at the records, but Mike Norvell, 5-3. Florida State, Mario Cristobal, 4-4, which has been an uphill battle for the Hurricanes all year. Drew, you brought this to my attention, but the implications here, yes, they are evident in the state of Florida, but you had a pretty good reference point talking to a guy that was highly recruited last year and what this game could potentially mean for some other top prospects in the Sunshine State.
Yeah, you go back to Shamar Stewart and his recruitment, the former 5-star defensive lineman that's at Texas A&M. I was talking to some people inside his camp over the summer after Shamar had made his decision. I said, hey, if Miami had beat Alabama, had they not gotten run over last season in week 1, would that have changed things in the recruitment? They said no. They said the thing that they felt really sunk Miami was the loss to Florida State last season. That was a surprising loss up in Tallahassee. So I think when you look at this game, right, no college football playoff implications here, but when it comes to recruiting in the Sunshine State, this is a big deal. Florida State, the past 2 years, they have worked satellite camps at FIU, and Miami has not liked that. And the reason why Mike Norvell and his staff has done that is they're trying to get a footing in South Florida. They're trying to expand in Miami-Dade County. Mike Norvell, he's going to recruit the Panhandle. He's going to recruit from Orlando North. He's going to get into, Alabama. He's going to get into Georgia. They've done an excellent job of doing that, but they still know that they need some talent. There's a ton of big recruiting battles that are still out there right now. Ruben Bain, a top 247 defensive lineman. He's got Miami and Florida State in his top group of schools. Hakeem Williams, who already committed to Florida State, he took a surprising unofficial visit to UM a few weeks ago. Damari Brown, a top 247 cornerback. The list goes on and on. And then I think the other thing is, Miami and Florida State have both been very active in the transfer portal over the years, about as active as anyone else out there. And I would anticipate these two programs going head to head for the same guys once this thing opens up in December for that window. So this game, it means a lot. And Mario Cristobal, when he was at Oregon, he went 6-1 against his rivals, Oregon State and Washington. Mike Norvell, on the other hand, right now, he's 1-2 against his biggest rivals in Florida and Miami. So a lot on stake for a game that's in a primetime slot. And again, I said it, I'll be watching Texas A&M Florida at noon. We got the Tennessee Georgia at 3:30, and then the nightcap, Miami FSU, and those teams have gotten into a few scuffles in recent years. So I think that's, again, must-watch TV, and we're going to know a lot about both programs coming out of this one.
It's going to be a lazy weekend for the boys, but a productive weekend as well. And Drew, you said it, like Mike Norvell, we've kind of taken a lot of flack. I've taken a lot of flack for saying, hey, this is a guy that needs to win this year. And I think, he has the backing of Florida State, their administration, but this is a big game. You have to win games like this. And a lot of these other losses are maybe unforgiving, but the rivalry games, when you look at it, are the games that are either going to elevate you or sink you on an accelerated pace. So Mike Norvell, this is a big one for him. This is a big one for Mario Cristobal. You see what he's done with a 4-4 record. If he gets a win over the Noles this weekend, you know how he's going to utilize this on the recruiting trail as Miami continues to surge the number 8 class in the country. Florida State at number 19. They're still working on guys like Cedric Baxter Jr., one of the best running backs in the country. But Drew, before we wrap up, any final thoughts on today's show?
That's it, man. That's all I got. You got all my ammo. All my bullets are gone.
That was a lot. We emptied the clip right there, 253. Guys, as always, we appreciate you joining us, the Oyster Boys, and we will be back next Monday, 3 o'clock Eastern time. And I want to give a shout out to the boys in the back, Jesse and Colin, Director Colin. That is at that. But for Andrew Ivins, I'm Cooper Petagna. We'll see you next week.